All right, welcome back. Thirsty Thursday number 58. Tonight we're talking with Chief and author Marc Hill, who just had a book come out in November, officially hit the shelves. And we were just talking pre-show that he just finished up the audiobook. It's going to be a great show tonight as always. I feel like one of the four of the regulars is always kind of rotating through. So Bobby won't be able to make it tonight, but I'm back here. And as normal, we have Mike and Trevor. So let's kick this off. Let's see what Marc has to say, and we'll kind of go from there. So, Chief, why don't you go ahead and give us a little intro about yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. As you said, I am Marc Hill. I'm in Wisconsin. Um, Former fire chief, former a lot of things, former teacher, former principal, former football coach, track coach, all kinds of different things, right? Yeah, so I wrote a book called Too Dark 30. Really, the goal behind the book was I wanted to create a resource for anyone in emergency services specifically that was trying to teach. I think we've all had that basic instructor course, and if you haven't, it's okay. It's a good course. There's a lot to be said about the course, and I got kind of pigeonholed when I was chief, and when I left being a chief and went to a larger department, I was kind of that pigeonholed person because I had taught for 8 years. I taught middle and high school for 8 years, and then I had been a principal as well in between. So I was that guy that, well, Marc was a teacher. We'll have Marc teach all the probies, and we'll have Marc do, he knows how to do that stuff. He likes doing the teaching thing. We'll have Marc do all that teaching stuff. And I was fine with it because I enjoyed teaching. Um, I was a teacher for all those years, and while I was teaching, I was also a volunteer firefighter and EMT. So I was doing that kind of stuff at the same time. So, the whole teaching aspect, it was fine with me. It was a natural thing that I could do. So I didn't feel like I was getting pigeonholed or being voluntold all the time to be that guy. But at the same time, when I wasn't working, when I wasn't on shift, I was always constantly getting, emails and phone calls and, well, we've got this other guy, we got this other person on this other shift and they're having all these problems and, all these different things. And so I was constantly coming up with, well, okay, this is how you want to do this. And this is how, if you're going to quiz them like this, or, these are the types of questions you want to look for. And this is how you want to evaluate a person. And, then there was confusion too about, well, am I a teacher or am I a mentor to this person? I'm like, listen, those are two different concepts. If you're a teacher, you're a teacher. If you're a mentor, you're a mentor. Those are not the same thing. So, having to explain all that stuff. So it was years in the making, the book. And I finally had the time because I had moving a patient who hasn't gotten a back injury, blew out my L45 disc. And so I was off with my back. So while I was sitting immobile, my wife's like, why don't you just write that book that you've been talking about for all these different years? So I'm like, oh, I have the time now to do that. Sure, yeah, I'll do that. So I did. I started typing and I wrote pretty much the first draft of the book, and then came back to work, came back on shift. Actually was good for about a year and a half, and then I got hurt again with my back, and I ended up hurting my L5S1 disc. So I was out again. So that's when I was out for the second time with my back laid up, that's when I'm like, okay, let's finalize this book thing. And that's when that all came through. So I tried using my experience from teaching and having been a fire chief and having been, a volunteer firefighter and having been a professional firefighter for 8 years and all these different things. I tried melding all that stuff and all that knowledge that I kind of had, and tried pouring it into a simple, easy to read, resource and guide that anyone could pick up and flip through and use to the best of their ability. And then my big thing too is telling stories. So even when I was teaching, I would always try to tell a story about something. Um, and I thought storytelling is really important because it gives context, it gives illustration. A lot of the students I had, and I have students. Oh, there's guys in our department now that I was their teacher and I was their football coach. So, which is kind of funny. There was there was a lieutenant who he's a lieutenant now, who he would always call me Mr. Hill for the longest time. And everyone thought it was hilarious because it's like, oh, he still calls you Mr. Hill. That's so funny. It's like, well, yeah, but I was his teacher. I was Mr. Hill for him for many years. He didn't know me by anything else. So, it's humorous, but the students and the people I taught, the things that they remember they remember my stories. And they remember the context. Well, I remember when Mark told us about how he almost died, and this is the events that led to that, and this is what he learned from the process. So storytelling was central to what I believed education could do. So I started my book by starting with storytelling and the importance of storytelling, and then I told stories throughout the entire book. Every chapter has got multiple stories, trying to give context and illustration to what I'm talking about and what I'm trying to portray, and the knowledge. So, and I tried to make it an easy to read. It's not something that's full of jargon that you need a secondary dictionary to look up. What does this word mean? Okay, didactic. Oh, I say what it is, and then I say what the easy explanation is right next to it, so you can't forget it. So, but I wanted a quick resource. That was my biggest thing.
Gotcha. Very nice. So, one of the things that, and I know I've talked to Mike about this, when he's running our training at work,
sure,
it's so simple, and he breaks it down, and it's all about. I think a lot of it is the preparation that goes into it.
Oh, huge, yeah.
And as an instructor, he's probably one of the best people I've had to sit down and say, "Hey, look. This is it goes from start to finish, and just does a great job." And then when it's time for the hands-on stuff, again, it's step by step because you've got that review in your mind, and now you're just putting it all into practice. So I think I can't count the number of times that at the end of the day, it's like, holy cow, it's a productive day,
yeah,
and you're B, but there's so much that you've logged because you see it, you do it, you hear it, and it's just a constant cycle. So what is something that helps? And obviously you guys have a leg up because you have you have an education in education.
Yeah.
But as people that want to be instructors, what's something that to help them besides reading the book to get them going in the right direction?
Well, from my aspect, when I was in college, I went to Michigan Tech University up in the UP, and I didn't start in education right away. I was actually in engineering, and I took a lot of social studies classes to offset my bad grades I was getting in engineering. So math was not my forte. I mean, differential equations in Calc 4, whew, I still have, nightmares about that. But I had a coming to Jesus meeting with Bob Bonzak was his name. He was the electrical engineering advisor. He's like, Mark, if you ever want to get out of school, you should look into teaching. You should go be a teacher. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll go look at that, So I did, and it fit very well, and I really enjoyed it. But the one thing about all those classes, I mean, you'd have educational theory, educational psychology, educational technology, all these different courses about education. There wasn't a single course I took that was called How to Be a Teacher. There wasn't one. And a lot of it was you learn as you do. And I think that goes with, most jobs. I think, you can have all the knowledge in the world and you can have all the certificates in the world, but until you actually do the job, that's when you gain the actual experience. And that's when you figure out the little shortcuts and figuring out how this whole process works and what are you really in charge of, and how the whole thing fits together. So for me it was really sink or swim with how to figure out how to be a teacher. um, I student taught ninth grade world history in West Appear, which is a suburb outside of Green Bay. And my cooperating teacher was Candy Heiderscheid was her name. She was a 30-year veteran, fantastic teacher. She came in and she's like, okay, well, you know what, Mark, you are not getting any of my materials. I'm like, okay, here's the book. Okay, I will be here if you need me on the first day. After that, I'll be in my office. Okay, you have the entire class to yourself, sink or swim. So it was like, okay, all right, or we're gonna do this, So, the college is like, well, what's gonna happen here, Mark? Is you're gonna take one class, you're gonna observe for 2 weeks, then you're gonna take one class, and then you're gonna do that, and then in another couple weeks you'll take two classes, and then three, and then four, and then you'll have a full load before your student teaching ends. Well, that wasn't how it was. It was nope. Day one, she introduced me to the course or the class, and she said, all right, here's the syllabus, here's the book. And day two, they're all yours, and you can't use anything that I have. So that was good. It was good. I mean, it was one of those things like, yeah, okay, either you can do it or you can't. And, gosh, this is 23 years ago when that happened. So, I mean, it's a different world today. So a lot of, I don't want to be one of those people that rags on, millennials and all these, because I don't think that really, a lot of that doesn't really matter, because, either you figure out how to do it, right? You learn how to find the shortcuts, or you try hopefully to ask someone, find a mentor, find someone that you can try to bounce, ideas off of, So when people come, like when I have, we have FTOs now. So originally, our department, we didn't have FTOs. And I know every department, Ben and I were talking about how drastically different every 50 state is, and how even between counties within states, they all can change. We didn't have an FTO position in our department. It was just like, well, you're voluntold that you're going to be that preceptor. You're going to be their, you're going to watch them for the first 30 days is what we did. So people would come in, they'd have 2 weeks of probationary academy, kind of getting you all up to speed and, getting you ready to, do whatever the job was. And for us, you had to come in with Fire 2 and you had to be a paramedic. So you had to come in with those things already done. So the 2-week academy just basically said, okay, this is our way of how we do stuff, right? Then after they get done with that, those people are then assigned to a shift, one of the 3 shifts, and then for 30 days, that first month, so 10 days, we run a 10-day, average in a month, right? Our schedule is a California schedule, so we end up working 56 hours in a week, average. But during that 10-day period, you were assigned as the 3rd medic on the first out ambulance. And then the senior medic was supposed to be watching you. We didn't have an FTO position. So after years of doing that, I was like, we really need to have an FTO. We need to have something actually organized and set out, and at the same time, our chief was trying to do strategic planning and succession planning and all these, all the different things that were going on at the same time. So I'm like, we need to have something, set in stone. Not so much all this ambiguity and we have 3 stations. So we would always say, well, we're one department, or we're one, department, but we're really 9, because every station was going to do things a little differently, and every shift would do things a little differently. So we were one department, but really we were 9. We were, Station 3 B crew. We would do this, and Station 2 A crew would do this, and there was no, there was no good working, together. We would come together when we had to. And, if we had to come downtown to Central, we came downtown and we were in and out as fast as we could to get back to where we were going. So everyone would leave us alone, kind of a thing. So, the fact that we try to incorporate this department-wide standardized training method was a huge, improvement to our system for sure.
Yeah. I know that's something that we struggle with. I don't want to say struggle with, but like we have everybody in our department is considered an FTO.
Okay.
We have preceptors for students from the paramedic colleges that come. Like we have specific stuff to do for that college. But other than that, like a new employee comes, however it comes, like we do a lot of part-timers. Like one day I could be FTOing somebody, tomorrow Trevor's FTOing them. And again, it's 2 different shifts, 2 different stations, and it's completely different. And Trevor, since you kind of ran that when you were there, and you want to kind of talk about like your thoughts on that, and then maybe talk about your thoughts on instructing as someone from a non-education background and also having done a lot of instruction.
Well, I don't know how I should take the non-education background. Man, right through the years, right to the feelings. No, I mean,
but you don't have a degree in education.
I know. I'm just kidding with it. But out of everybody on the screen, I don't come from the education background, which all of you have taught at the at the middle school, high school level. The only thing I have comparable to that is I attended middle school and high school. So, but with that being said, I think that's very important. And Mark kind of hit on this a little bit before, is that when you go through your methods of instruction class, and they teach you, how people learn and the learning styles, that's all really, really great stuff. But I think that the folks who come from the education background have a much broader spectrum and are much more comfortable with it versus that person who's come from the fire service and they have a passion for teaching. They have an ability to teach that hasn't been developed or exposed yet. And I still remember, Ben, you probably remember Bob Klum, who was the technician down at Lower Eastern Shore of Memphrey. For those you might not be familiar with him, he was a very, very experienced Baltimore County firefighter for many, many years. And I always had a passion to teach or instructor, to pass information more than anything. And I remember after I went through my ITC1 and ITC2 class, and I was being evaluated, I had my instructor evaluator, which was one. And I still remember this day, I had my little cheat sheet. I had an index card with what I wanted to talk about to the class I was teaching. And as I was walking up to greet this group of recruits, Bob Klum came up to me and snatched that card out of my hand. He said, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, this is what I'm going to talk about." He said, "You know this stuff." He said, "Teach from the heart, not from the card." And I was mortified. And because that was my safety net. And he goes, "No," he said, and so I appreciate the fact at the time, I was like, what the heck is this guy doing to me? He's setting me up for failure. He's going to torpedo me. But actually, if anything else, he made me realize why I was there and what I should be doing versus, going, through the rote memorization of that card. Yeah. And I think, Mark, you alluded to this quite a bit on, sometimes on LinkedIn and other things where you still show that vulnerability to say, hey, look, I've been doing this for a while, but we can always be better. There's always a different way to go about this. We can always receive it and bring in information and put it out a different way. Yeah. And, so, Ben, from that aspect, what you're talking about is when I became an instructor in fire service, I was relatively young, and I really didn't feel that confident as an instructor because who the heck am I? I'm this young buck, and these people have been there 5, 10, 15 years longer than me. They must know more than I do, and they must be better at this. That wasn't necessarily the case. And people like Dougie Scott, Del Baker, Tommy Kane, these are people who took me aside when I was initially teaching and running the training division to say, hey, look, tell us what you want to be done. I'm like, why should I tell you? You know more than I do. They're like, time and grade does not mean more knowledge. You have more recency. You've gone to these classes. You have more to bring back and contribute. That's your job. So I really had to look at things through a different lens, and still to this day continue to do that. Is to say, you know what you know. Hopefully, you know what you don't know, and you're able to balance those things out. And if you don't know something, there's no embarrassment. There's no shame in that. That's where I'll reach out to somebody who's a subject matter expert in the field, or somebody who knows much, much more than I do about something. And we've all had that instructor. We've all had that person who was the state fire college instructor, whomever, and they would stand before us and pontificate and point at the now PowerPoint, then the acetate on the overhead projector or the slide carousel. Dating myself a little bit on that, but nevertheless, you really kind of knew what they didn't know, and I didn't realize it at the time. I mean, I remember the first basic fire for one class that I taught. When it came to the wildland firefighting section, I brought in it was actually Tina Vickers' husband, Gerald Vickers. I mean, the guy's jumped out of airplanes, in Western wildland fires. He's been with the Forestry Service. The guy's fought a wildland fire too. My biggest experience with wildland firefighting, again, was that 20-foot by 40-foot patch of trees behind the 94th Street Mall in Ocean City. So I felt very disingenuous teaching it, and I had a student come to me and say, "Hey, sir, why didn't you teach this section?" I said, "Well, I can read the textbook as well as you can. I've not done this. I want you to learn this from the." And I didn't realize at the time that gave me a little bit of street cred. And at first, I was a little bit embarrassed. Like, wow, I'm an instructor. I should know everything. I'm the omniscient, omnipotent being. No, not whatsoever. So I think that once you become comfortable in where you're, I'm not saying where your passion lies, but also where your ability to not only take the information in and regurgitate it back out. If someone asks you a question, how much background do you have to actually answer that question? And are you comfortable enough with yourself to go, you know what? I don't know, but I know a dude who does. And that's what I respected. And like with you and Mike, Mike Wood, obviously, Bobby McGee, Ben, you're the same way. Mark, I see that a lot of the communication that you put out there is you're very honest and visceral with that. So with that being said, Mark, what are some things that you look at as an instructor, with what we just talked about, that vulnerability? How does that help you become a better instructor? And I know you might dovetail that a little bit in your in Too Dark 30 as well. So if you don't mind speaking on that for a minute.
Well, a lot of it goes back to that concept of imposter syndrome, right? Where you get a position, or you're asked to do something, or you're asked to present, or you're voluntold that, hey, guess what? You're going to do the confined space refresher. Okay, all right, I guess we're doing that, And like you said, it's to the point where it's like, well, okay, yeah, I've done the course, I've gone through the refreshers myself, but I've never taught the course. And it goes to, the old thing of, the classic, if you want to learn something, or if you want to know something, you need to teach it. You retain 90%, and in statistics, how that goes. Everyone's, there's shades of gray. It doesn't literally mean 90%. It's just on average. You just retain more information, right? You know
Mark,
more about
gray's different, Joe.
Yeah, you know more things about things when you start having to tell it to somebody else. And I think a lot of the times, when you get these new instructors, or specifically when you're told that, hey, you're going to be the preceptor, the FTO, whatever the situation is, and you're worried like, oh, I don't know anything. What do I know? I barely know what the hell I'm doing. I don't know how to teach. I don't know how to do these things. And when it comes right down to it, everyone feels that way. There's not a single person that doesn't doubt or have a thought in their mind that I don't know enough. I'm going to get asked a question I don't know the answer to, oh my God, they're going to figure out that I'm an idiot, or, you start having all of this negative thought in your, and and that's a normal reaction. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter what position you're having. It doesn't matter what's going on. Whenever you start out in a position, you're always going to think like that, always. And it just, the syndrome part comes to, well, are you debilitated by acting? I mean, there's severity in the range, right? And it goes back to what I was saying. Well, okay, sink or swim. Can you figure out how to do the job? And if you don't know, do you know the right person to ask? And are you comfortable asking? That's the other thing too. Like for me, and I try to do as much as I can, throwing little tidbits out there about different things on social media, from what I've understood and what's worked well for me, right? Number one is just being honest. Whenever I start a class, I just got done teaching 3 sections, the paramedic refresher, right? So first thing is, yeah, I've been a medic now for 8 years. I've gone through however many refreshers. Yeah, I'm an instructor too, blah, 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 blah. I've done all the different things. But you know what? I don't know everything. Nor will I tell you that I know everything. In fact, I hate the word expert, because expert tells me that there's nothing more to know. And that is impossible. There's always more to know. There's always something more to gain. There's always more knowledge to get. There's always a different view to take. There's always circumstances, and there's all kinds of things that go into situations, right? So I always tell the students, hey, listen, I don't know everything. I'm not going to pretend to tell you that I know everything. I will be straight up with you that if I don't know, you know what? We'll figure it out together. And that, starting the class out like that, I've always found that it helps break the seal, right? Like everyone just take a deep breath. Everyone just relax. We're all in this together, okay? We're all here together. We're all here for a reason. We're all here for a purpose, okay? This is not an animosity situation. There's, we want to get to the end of this having learned something, having gained knowledge, gained experience, and whatever the situation, whatever the course is. And when we get to that end, you know what? Just know that it's not the end. It's just the beginning of where your knowledge can take you into the future, right? So, those concepts are huge. But going back to what you were saying too, a lot of teaching though is knowing who your audience is. So I'm going to, I will instruct, if we're doing, October fire prevention stuff, and I've got a group of first graders, I'm not going to talk to those kids the same way I'm going to talk to high school students, right? Same thing goes for, if I'm teaching firefighter 1, or if I'm teaching an extrication class and I've got volunteer firefighters, which are going to be a gambit. When I was on a volunteer department, when I was fire chief, I was full-time, but I was the only full-time member of that department. Everyone else was part-time. We don't want to say volunteer because they were getting a wage, but at the same time, they really were, right? They were volunteering their time to what they could do for the department and for the municipality that we worked in. And I was the only full-time person. So, that was a situation. But I had people that literally were, 19, 20 years old. And I had people that were 70 years old. Massive generational changes, massive generational shifts, massive, complexities dealing with how you talk to one group, how you don't talk to another group. Well, one group expects in their instructor what another group expects another instructor. So when you're teaching a group of that audience, you really have to vary how things go. If I have just a group of solid 20 just recruits that are fresh probationary, every one of them is 21, 22 years old, that message is going to be severely different versus my volunteer group that I may have, an individual in that department that's been doing it for 40 years. But going back to what you said, Chief, just because you've done it for 40 years does not mean that you've done it correctly for 40 years. And doesn't mean that you've been doing things appropriate or legally or doing it the legal way. Short story to give you an example. So when I became chief down in Rothschild, They were giving me a tour. I was telling Ben before we got on here that, everyone always asks, well, what's your next book, Mark? And you know what? Another book I could write is how I failed as a fire chief. Because, we all complain about, organizations and how bad, some organizations are. And I will be the first one to admit, man, I haven't been a part of a well-run organization, including the one I ran, so I could write a whole book about my failures. I could list off, I made a list one day like, oh, I screwed this up. I screwed this up. I screwed this up. But the day I took over as fire chief, I took over for a chief that had died line of duty death. He had died of a heart attack after an EMS call. The bunting was still in the corner of the station when I got a tour of the building. And I was given, directive from the municipality. We need you to come in here and fix things and all these, apparent problems and, all this stuff. I was going to be the axe man, right? I was given a directive. You need to fix this, Mark. It's, this is going to be your ship now. I'm like, okay. Went around to the ladder truck. What they called on the side of the truck was ladder. However, it was technically it was a telesquirt. It was an elevated master stream with a rescue ladder that is not technically a ladder. We want to get into it's not. I'm like, that's telesquirt. That's not a ladder truck. I'm not going to use that as a ladder truck ever. But whatever. Coming in, I opened one of the side doors, and there was this giant dual spool, hundreds of feet of electrical cord, extension cord. And I'm like, okay, why do we have like 1,000 feet of electrical cord on a double reel? What is this for? And then one of the guys is like, well, it's for our saws. And then he goes to the next compartment and opens the compartment up. There are two 1984 Craftsman plug-in chainsaws. I'm trying to think. 14. They were 16 inches. It was a 16-inch bar. I'm like, okay, what are those saws? Why? What? I don't understand. What's the saw for? And he's like, well, those are our vent saws. I was like, what do you mean they're your vent saws? Like, are you talking roof vent saws? He's like, well, yeah, we need the cord to be able to get up onto the roof to use the saw. I'm like, okay, yeah, we're not doing that ever. No, we're not doing that. And actually, I got pushback from some of the, more elder statesmen on the department that I was wasting money by buying a Sure vent saw and putting that on the rig and taking off 1,000 feet of electrical cable and two 1984 Craftsman electrical saws.
Holy
shit. It's shocking and it's amazing, but that goes to what I was saying, that even when I stepped in as chief, I had an idea, but I still, I learned a hell of a lot in that first year working out of a closet in the fire station. I did. I learned a lot. And I thought I was prepared going in, having been a principal, of a building and done budgeting and, all those different things. But being a chief is a lot more about politics than it is about, a lot of other things. And you learn a lot by doing that. And the same thing goes for when I was instructing. You think but then at the same time, you really don't until you start getting into it and start actually doing it. That's when you kind of like, oh, so that's how that works. And okay, that's how that works. The chief's example of bringing someone in to talk about, wildfires, that's fantastic. I mean, that's 100%. When I do the refreshers for paramedic, we talk about OB, pregnancy stuff. Guess what? I've never birthed a child. Okay. I have helped my wife by pulling out our 3 daughters. That was the extent of, my abilities with childbirth. But when it came to, we delivered, and I talked about it in the book, it was one of the things that was a miraculous thing. We delivered a preemie full breech birth. That was something else. But at the same time, I've never done that before. And, you just hope that you've prepared yourself by, visualizing, by reading, by learning as much as you can prior to getting into those situations. So going back to, the beginning, we all have doubts. We all have, worries about whether you're doing it correctly or you're doing it right. And, the best advice I can give to anyone who, is worried or thinking like that is to just don't worry about it. Everyone feels like that, and just do it. You're going to screw up, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with screwing up. All right. You're going to learn. I've learned more from my failures and my mistakes than I've ever learned by just doing it perfectly the first time. So, jumping in to that deep end sometimes is the best thing you can do.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys this, because
I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry. I know Mike's got a lot going on, and I told him, I said, hey, if there's something that you want to comment on, I want you to just either shoot me a text or turn your camera back on. So while we got him here for a second, go ahead, Mike. Please tell me it's something, and I don't mean to pick on your previous department chief. Please tell me it's something about the electric saws.
Well,
Mark,
you know what?
Just as a side note, before I let Mike go, Mike works for Baltimore City and is the tower ladder driver for Baltimore City. So when I heard you start talking in the direction in which that was going, I could feel the tension in Mike. We are 45 miles. We're 40 miles away from each other right now. So go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
Sorry to jump in your grave there, Trevor. Yeah. Well, you know what? Here's a real quick story. Piggyback on that will kind of be pretty relatable there, Chief Hill, and ironic considering when we speak on Baltimore City or any major metropolitan area, you think, well, that department probably has it all squared away. Well, I'll tell you, up until about 10 years ago, we used the still version of the K12, of course. Rotary saw, and clearly marked on the stills with a nice big yellow warning label that was right beside the carburetor, right beside the pull handle, said, "This saw is not designed to cut wood products." And it, of course, alluded to the blade as well. There is no blade manufactured by this make or this manufacturer that is capable of cutting wood products. And we operated with those saws for my first 10 years and probably the previous 20 before that. And it was actually my senior driver at the time when I was young, who found that label and presented it to operations chief of the department. And within 2 weeks, all the still saws were gone. And that's when Husqvarna saws began showing up. So just because you're a department that seems relatively small or isolated doesn't mean that those big departments have it all right. So, in relation to the electric chainsaw story, but no, I one thing I wanted to comment on was I think you're hitting on what I believe to be one of the most important aspects of being a quality instructor in the fire service, not in general, but in the fire service, and that is being able to self-reflect.
Yeah,
I work with a lot of guys that I've been beside for almost 15 years, some of them. And I know guys on other companies that have been in the same positions for, the last dozen years or so. And, we'll sit down and talk shop sometimes. And, I'll spit out some things tactically and different strategies and things like that. And some of them who, I respect greatly would say, well, how'd you learn that? Or where'd you figure that out? And I'm always surprised by hearing that from some people, because the reason I believe that these good instructors are made in the fire service is that when they get off of a job, they are the ones that aren't high-fiving. they're the ones that obviously there's that excitement and gratification from what you did, but they are the ones that are a little bit more reserved, a little bit more introverted, and that's because they're completely self-assessing. And I say that because there was never a time that from start to finish, when I would arrive, the minute my foot hit the ground, I would monitor every movement that I made. And throughout the duration of the incident, at the very end, as we packed up and got back in the rig and left, I would think about all those steps, and I would think about my stumbles along the way, almost like a sprinter. You might have a stumble and no one notices it, just you, because it's that minor of a stumble. But it's those little tiny trips that you learn these things from and that you improve upon. And along the way, you discover sometimes a better methodology, a better way of doing, or a better way of performing. And then you're able to disseminate that information properly. And it's those self-assessors that I think become some of the best instructors. Now, unfortunately, self-assessment and opportunity go hand in hand. If you are not given the opportunity to get experience, then the self-assessment becomes very difficult. You can have that in simulation training, but it's just like football. You can practice 7 days a week. It is nothing like the dance. It's nothing like going to the game and being in it. That's where you learn the most about yourself, about your capabilities, and about your shortcomings. So I think that's, I just wanted to dovetail on that. And I think that is probably one of the major areas that separate the mediocre instructors in the fire service versus the quality ones.
Sure.
So sorry, Trevor, go ahead, man.
Oh, no worries, brother. I mean, that's a very sage advice. And just to kind of dovetail on what you're talking about, Mike, is I think it's not only important to talk about your triumphs in the fire service, but also you use your failures as teaching points. I know a major one that resulted in what should have been Mayday for me, I'd used as part of the FDBA boot camp class, and it's very difficult because at first you're kind of reclusive about it. You're a little bit embarrassed. It's like, wow, man, I really messed up. And at the same time, it's like, yeah, you did. But if you don't get this information out to somebody else, they're going to make that same mistake you did, and nobody's benefited from that experience, good, bad, or indifferent. Experience is a very powerful motivator, but you have to put it out there. So, Mike, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and that's why I have some respect for like yourself, Ben, and Mark, is that you guys will put everything out there and say, hey, look, I'm not saying I did this 100%, could be 85%, 50%, judge it how you will, but this is my experience. Here's what I did, here's what I didn't do, and take this a little bit forward. So what I wanted to throw out to you guys, my question was, I think there's a lot of benefit in trying to develop our next generation of instructors. And with that being said, there's a lot of different thought processes out there. And one of the most poignant ones I've heard, and I'm always about the relevance, because if you're retired, there's a lot of great information that you can give back to people who are coming up behind you. But at the same time, if you've not been in that jump seat, if you've not had an air pack on, if you've not been on that pump panel, whatever the case is, after time, it goes from relevant information to war stories. And I think we have to be very careful with that. And I'll tell you a little bit of a backstory of why I'm saying this, and then go forward. Way back when you guys used to do the Salisbury seminar, Ben, this is like years and years and years ago. There was a chief and commissioner from a very, very well-known, well-respected major East Coast fire department who came down and was a speaker. And I got some excellent sage advice. I was, a aspiring lieutenant at the time. I wasn't even a lieutenant. I wanted to step up to that, and I asked him some good advice, and he gave it to me. Spent the time. Wonderful information. he had retired, and then about 8 or 10 years later, they had him back to speak. And I was like, wow, I got to go see this guy again. He was great. He was inspiring, this and the other. There was no new information. It was the same stories, the same thing. And right then it kind of hit me. And I heard something very, very recently, when I recently in the last 2 months. And this was a visceral comment. I can't get butthurt over it whatsoever. And it wasn't directed at me, but it's just a general thing where a younger firefighter who wants to be an instructor, wants to be a lieutenant, captain, go through essentially go through the chairs and go through the progression, goes, I don't want to hear information from a bunch of gray hairs that I can get off YouTube in 20 minutes. And that was a powerful statement. And they weren't being disrespectful, but it was when you kind of wrap your head around. So here's my question that I threw out to all of you. One of the things that I found somewhat valuable is getting some of these younger folks to do teach backs. So even if it's the probie at the kitchen table, to say, hey, I want you to do a 5-minute presentation just before dinner on a Halligan bar, is to kind of get them in there. And everybody at that table knows how to use a Halligan bar. But you know what? Every now and then that probie will surprise you, and they'll go in, and if you tell them that's their assignment, they will dig in, they'll research, they'll find some obscure crap somewhere. And I shouldn't say crap. I mean, they'll find something that none of us have ever heard, or sometimes it's just a general thing, but it gets them in the pattern of trying to take information they have and pass it along to somebody. In my belief, I don't care whether you've been in the fire service for, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 10 years, 15, 20, 25 years. The people coming up behind you, you have an obligation to pass along information to them. So as long as we're not using it as a negative tool or just trying to burn this person up, I mean, I think that the teach backs the people out of their comfort zone, but it also gets them to go and invest in trying to learn about that subject matter that we've tasked them with. What are your guys' thoughts, good, bad, and indifferent, about using the teach back method with our younger folks to try to mentor them to be instructors down the road?
I think a lot of that has to do with the active learning process, right? So, it goes back to what I was saying with the audience. And I think, like you were saying, you've got a new group of people. If you're training a new group of people and they have limited experience, asking them, how would you guys like to, how would you like to learn on this topic? Do you want, I could bring this person in, they could tell you everything there is to know. Well, if you want to talk about saws, this guy he not only is he the Truckee smash saw guy, but he also has a side business where he, does work, doing lumber and cutting trees or whatever the situation is. He'd come in and he could tell you everything there is about a saw, the different parts of a saw, going through the entire thing about the saw, right? We could bring him in. We could have him talk about the subject. Would you think there's benefit and value in that? And if you're honest with your students at the beginning, like I said, if you're telling them, listen, I don't know everything and I'm good with finding things out the way that you want to learn, you should be able and be comfortable enough to adapt to that situation. Don't think that it's a negative thing, because it's not, right? You want the goal of teaching and the goal of any course is to gain knowledge and to get those, skills and abilities where we could then act on them later on, right? So how you get to that point, how you define that knowledge and how you gain that knowledge in the beginning, I think there's no problem with doing that active learning, teach back, tell me how you would like to do, or, I show you, now you do it, right? Here, tie a bowline. All right, great. Now do it with your gloves on. Okay, great. Now here's another way to do the bowline, right? Around, up, over, and through. Okay, now we're going to do it with the bunny ears now. We're going to do, okay, here comes the bunny, goes around the hole, he goes down the hole. So there's different ways to do all kinds of, there's different ways to tie knots. I mean, there's tons of different ways to tie a knot, right? Rescue harnesses. Here, take out your webbing. All right, now we're all going to do different ways to tie webbing. We're all going to do different rescue knots. We're all going to do different harnesses. We're all going to do different drag pulls. We're all going to do different, everyone. And then every single person teaches their way or how they were, assigned to do their harness, now they're going into that, I'm now teaching the class, which is not a bad thing. They're going to remember more. They're going to remember how they do it more. They're going to get feedback from hey, this was way easier to tie this harness up and to lift this person. Mark's I'm 6'3". Well, I used to be 6'3" on my football roster. I've shrunk a little bit, 270 pounds, without my gear on, right? So you throw me with all my gear on, Mark's 350. Okay, so yeah, we're going to haul Mark down the hallway and downstairs and back up the stairs. What's the easiest way to move my big butt around? Let's try different ways. Let's try different, scenarios. Let's try different things. And, there's nothing wrong with having the students tell you as the instructor, hey, can we try it this way? Why not? Let's give it a shot. And if it fails miserably, hey, well, you know what? We found a way not to do it, right? The old way, that old quote from, back in the day when Edison was trying to come up with the light bulb. You've done it so many thousands of times. Well, yeah, I found 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. So, I mean, just because you fail at something doesn't mean that it's that's it. I'm done. Pack it up. I suck. I'm horrible. I'm just going to quit, right? No, you have to reflect. And what Mike was saying too, a good teacher will truly reevaluate what they did. I teach a course now called Evaluating the Evaluator. And if you literally are an instructor that is going through, and I'm giving the same assignments that I've been giving for 10 years, with the same exam that I've been giving for 10 years, which I've done the same thing for 10 years. If you're that kind of instructor, please get out of teaching, because you are not helping and you are not doing anything. The students are already gone and they are trying to teach themselves. And it's horrible, but there are a lot. I think we've all had instructors that are like that, hey, here's the answers to the test, because he's been given the same test for the last 5 years and hasn't changed a thing. And as a teacher, I go through and I look at, okay, if I've got a test, if I've got a quiz, and I got half my students have gotten question 3 wrong, I'm going to ask the students, hey, what was up with question 3? Everyone said it was C. Why did everyone pick C? Well, it's my bad. I made a bad quiz. I made a bad question. I wanted it to say this. This was my interpretation of how that question was supposed to be. And no, that's not okay. Well, it's my bad. I need to change that. So then the next time it's better, right? I mean, that's the thing. You need to constantly reevaluate what you're doing to become better, and that goes with anything, not just teaching. It goes, like Mike was saying, with being on the truck and learning all these different things. And, Chief Trevor, I'm sure there are things that you learned through the course that you have done that, okay, I need to reevaluate what I'm doing here. Holy crap, this is not, writing emails, communication, that's a huge thing, right? We're getting all fired up about stuff. I can't believe we're doing that. And then you write an email and you pump an email out. Do not send that thing right away. Let that stew for a little bit. Calm down. Don't just be reactionary and rip that Band-Aid off and shoot that thing. And I told him. And then you're like, oh, crap. I shouldn't have said what I said. Yeah, well, you calm down. You'll learn over the time that, okay, there's time here. Nothing, if this is not that important, as we sometimes need to step back and realize, but the active learning process of talking to people and involving the course and the students in your course and in the teaching aspect, there's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, it's called buy-in, right? We get everyone buying into the situation. Everyone's now a member and everyone's got a participation. Everybody wants to see the success of the course. Okay. Oh, there was another guy I know that does the Georgia smoke divers, and they do that whole week long, going in and doing the burns and all these different stuff, and they have different things they're supposed to do every week. They actively use what's going on in the course to adjust to the situation and to adjust to what the scenarios are and to who they have as students. There's a base level of expectation, but then there's gradients, right? Because you got different people coming in with much different experiences. If Mike comes down and talks, truck ops and search and rescue techniques, he's going to have a whole different level of experience than when I was Chief and Rothschild using a telesquirt and Craftsman sauce, right? So those are two different things, two different varying grades of experience. And we need to understand that when we're teaching these courses that, having everyone participate is not a bad thing at all.
No, whatsoever. And real quick, if you don't mind, I'm going to throw you under the bus briefly. Ben's been around for a while. He's not the old guy, and he's definitely not the young guy. He's got a lot of experience, a lot of background, a lot of education. Time as an officer in his department in Salisbury, but also in Ocean City. And you are Ben the Bridge. So how do you view some of this stuff? I mean, because I'm viewing things kind of in a rear view mirror now. A little bit more of my career because I'm towards the tail end of it. Versus that person that we've talked about, that young recruit or that new person who learns things in 20-second sound bites. Ben, you're kind of like that sweet spot in the middle. What are some of your thoughts on this?
I think there's something to take away from both sides of it. For someone that's kind of in my spot, I'm coming up on finishing my second full year in Ocean City as a full-time career fireman. And some of the things that I've learned before and things that I'm learning now, it's all like melding together. And I think I like where I am. I love my job. It's the first time I've said that. I've been saying that for the first time again in probably 4 or 5 years. It really is the best job in the world. I wish I'd have done it 16 years ago, and I'd be closer to retirement, but hey, here we are. I think as far as like teaching and instructing at the spot where I am, again, you have to have that vulnerability. I know that when I would, as a volunteer captain and acting assistant chief, that we were very fortunate in Salisbury, or I was very fortunate to have the ability to fill in as the engine captain for the shift that's working that day. If somebody needed some time off and they couldn't find somebody to fill it, hey Ben, can you come ride the engine? Sure. Hey, can you fill in as the assistant? Yeah, sure. So I was very fortunate to have that opportunity there, but to teach and to do the instructing like I did when I was there. Rachel is a teacher. She loves teaching. She went back and got her specialty in special ed, which I think works out very well for our relationship. But a lot of things that she talks about as far as education is like how we do things in the fire service. She at one point she had done a project on developing a curriculum, like the whole from start to finish, a whole program. And she looked at the Firefighter 1 curriculum and she's like, hey, you've taught this class. Like, did you know that you had all of these extra resources that are a part of this program? That here's your instructor guide, and then here's a CD and a website where you can go and you can have all of this other additional material to help the students understand the concepts better. I was like, no, I had no idea. I was like, we were forcing doors. Like, what more do you need with that? Like, I got a door, I got some chalks, Halligan and an axe. Like, we had a great time. So we I really tried to get to the point, like we would be leaving training and coming home, and I'd say, all right, how'd I do? Being the person that was running the training, whether I was actually doing the instructing or, like we had talked about, hey, I want to talk about hazmat. And I call a buddy up, hey, I need you to come in and talk about hazmat for an hour. Okay, yeah, cool. So I would do a little bit, he would talk, we'd leave on the ride home, the 10-minute ride. I'm like, all right, give me the good, bad, the ugly. And she's like, do you really want the good, bad, and the ugly? I was like, I really want the good. I don't really want the bad, and I really don't want the ugly. But yeah, how'd I do? And at first it was like, man, what the hell? Like, that was a good drill. Like, we had some great training that we did. And now you're telling me that it was terrible? Like, come on, like it can't be that bad. And then she starts like, and like at first it's like being vulnerable like that. You take it as like, oh, she's picking, she's poking. Like this is like I did bad, and it's not that. It's like, how do you get better?
Yeah.
So I think and I hope at some point I was able to start taking those little talks on the way home as ways that I could get better. And I hope that I did. In Ocean City, um, I try like when I go over something or when I talk about something or I get the opportunity to do something like that. Again, when we leave and it's like our crew, hey, like was that okay? Like did I like what did I miss? And or like even before we leave, like if we're pulling lines or we're forcing doors or whatever we're doing, like hey, did I miss anything? Like there's 5 or 6 of us standing around. Did I miss anything? Like what would you do different? Like I would try to incorporate that. And in my comment back to that person that says, well, I can just go watch like I can go watch YouTube and get it in 20 minutes, but you're going to take 2 hours to tell me.
Yeah.
Like, screw you, man. Like the 2 hours that you're going to get from that guy is going to give you more institutional knowledge of where you are and stuff that has happened there that they remember for a particular reason. Like Trevor, you remember that brush fire behind the 94th Street, which by the way, they've torn all those trees down for expansion. So we don't have to ever worry about those again. But you're going to get more out of that 2 hours. That's going to be a benefit to the rest of your career that you're not going to get in the 20 minutes on YouTube. Like it's just not going to happen. So every once in a while, it pays to sit down, shut up, and listen to what's going on at the kitchen table.
Yeah.
All right. So listen to those guys. And conversely, on the other side, for those guys that have been there for 20 years, 25 years, and are at the edge of retirement, like you guys have the institutional knowledge and have seen some crazy shit over your career in your department. And you have seen so much change in that time that one, if you don't change it, or if you don't share that, like that, when you leave, that leaves. So I don't get the benefit of that. It doesn't get passed on. The history and tradition of whatever we do, the way that we do it, is lost. And some of that is good, but some of that is bad.
Yeah.
And at the same time, when it comes time for your turn to do something, all right, maybe physically you can't do it anymore. But that doesn't mean that you need to be outside bitching about what everybody else is doing and like, why are we still here doing this? Like, well, because I still have to do it. I've got 23 more years to do this. So, like, hang on. Like, let me just give it a shot, make sure I don't screw it up. And then when I come out, hey, like, maybe give me a pointer because you've done it for 25 years.
Yeah.
So like, there's a full circle of that brand new person, the person in the middle, and the person at the end of their career. And it all, like, there has to be a balance between all three because there's a lot of information sharing going on. Because the person at the end of their career, we're going to get some technology based thing that they're not going to know how to do. But you know who does? The guy that just started, and the guy that, like, you told to piss up a rope. Like, now he doesn't want to help you. Like you have to work the full circle. That just my thought.
And one of the and going what you delved into, Ben, and of course we got a few chiefs sitting in these screens here right now, but the benefit to teachbacks, I believe, is not so much on the end of the rookie or the young person that is just joined the shift. You're going to give them a task and they're going to stand up and they're going to try to pull as much information as they can, and they might surprise you. They might throw something out there that you never thought of or that members of the crew never thought of. But the benefit to teachbacks, the benefit to these trainings in-house, when I say in-house, I mean in the firehouses with the company, the benefit to them actually falls more on the company officer. And the reason being is that there are a variety of learning styles. And these trainings that we put upon some of these rookies to stand up there and loosen them up and give them, a little bit of stage time, um, should be looked at by company officers more for their benefit, to see exactly what this person's learning style is, what their knowledge base is on certain disciplines, and from that you learn a lot about your men. You learn a lot about their shortcomings, their capabilities, their confidence levels, whether or not they're overconfident or whether or not they need work. So these train backs, or what have you, um, the benefit falls a lot more, I think, on the company officers. And in today's world, I know in certain departments, smaller departments, we place a lot of responsibility on a training officer per se, but um, the officers in houses should be shouldering a lot of that responsibility, especially with the progress of potentially having, capital pieces running out of those houses. Those officers need to know their men. They need to know all those little idiosyncrasies. They need to know their strengths, their weaknesses. They need to be deep inside their personnel's head, so that they know how they're going to perform on incidents, and they know what they can count on that person for, or where they might come up short. And a lot of that comes with these little trainings or these little responsibilities that we place on our people, to maybe just get up there and make a fool out of themselves for 5 minutes. And in that 5 minutes, that rookie might not get a whole lot. It might just be a bunch of laughs from other guys and gals at the kitchen table. But the company officer should be looking at it from a completely different lens than anyone else at all times.
I think that's a great point. It's like, again, talking about how, because they're going that person's going to teach similar to their learning style.
Yeah.
So if you can pay attention to that and you can pick that up when you go to have to instruct your crew or your group of people. All right, I know Ben needs to be able to see it and then do it for it to happen, because that's how he taught us about, like, he had to hold the Halligan bar in his hands to go over it and demonstrate it. I know Trevor. He's good. As long as he sees it, he's good. He's got it. And Mike, you just got to tell him about something. Hey, Mike, there's a Halligan bar. He's good. And so I think that's a great point. That whoever that person is, I being at one point being in that position, I never thought of that. It was always like, oh, they're doing a good job. Like, because again, like, they took the time to research it. They presented the information in a way that they were able to do well with it. And it never clicked that, like, oh shit, like, that's how I need to teach that person. That's awesome. I love that, Mike. Thanks.
Yeah, I think too, like going back to what we were saying about the different states. So here in Wisconsin, part of being a fire officer level, you have to concurrently take instructor 1. So the expectation that you don't have to pass and be certified, but you're supposed to take the course. So the expectation is, if you're fire officer 1, you also have the background and knowledge of being an instructor. Because like Mike was saying, if that's your house, if you're a lieutenant, captain, whatever your rank structure is, that's your house. You're in charge of your crew. You're in charge of those people. You're in charge of the training for the day for that group. And you should know what every single person, what their, KSA, what their knowledge, skills, and ability, what they can do, what I can count on them to do. If I tell you, hey, go take the door, pull this line over here, I can trust you that you're going to do that. I don't have to micromanage, right? I don't have to double think. I don't know if he knows what I mean by grab the can, and I don't know if he understands because that's your job as the station officer. That's your job, and your job is to be that teacher for all those people as well, whether you like it or not. 100% that's accurate. And I think good example, I think what Mike was alluding to too, is depending on what the departments are. So like in our department, how many years ago now is this? 4 years ago, we had a shakeup in the whole way our chiefs and battalion chiefs and deputy chief, and it was a whole reorganization of the hierarchy structure, and they hired specifically an EMS division chief, and we had hired specifically a fire rescue training chief. So now we have the quote unquote, we've got a training division chief now. So all the station officers, for us it's lieutenant, all those lieutenants are like, okay, great, I don't have to teach anymore, because we've got a division chief of training now. He's supposed to be doing all the training, so he's in charge of training everybody. I can sit back and not have to worry about it. And that's not the case. That's not the case at all. If you're, in our structure, the training chief sets the tone and organizes, going back to the curriculum. This is what I want you to do. This is the lesson plan. This is how I want to organize, given out to all 3 stations, all 3 shifts. This is how I want it to go through. If you have questions, seek me out. So yeah, you're still the lieutenant of that station. You're still in charge of your crew. It is the expectation that you're doing the training. And if you don't understand, then you ask questions, and you get answers as to how to best go about doing that training for that day. If you've got a situation where, like, our training chief is actually really good at ropes and knots, and he's one of those kind of people. So when it comes to doing that stuff, he likes to do that training. That's fine. He's what they, subject matter expert. Even though I don't like the word expert, he's still subject matter knowledgeable, right? He knows the ins and outs about knots and ropes and all that stuff. He's taken all the courses. He's certified up the wazoo. I would rather have him teach that course than have me fumble around and do the best of my job. So there's gradients there. That's the dichotomy of leadership versus Jocko's dichotomy. That's what happens. The dichotomy of how we teach. You got to know when to say yes. You got to know when to say no. You got to understand what you can do in your sandbox. You got to understand what your knowledge limits are. You got to understand how to best get that knowledge out to whoever you're teaching and whoever your crew is. And it's okay to say that I don't know, and it's okay to look out for outside resources. But as an officer, like Mike was saying, yeah, Ben, you're 100% correct. If you're the step-in assistant chief, and all of a sudden you got paperwork to do, when I was chief, there were things what is this now? How do I have to fill this out? Guess what? I'm calling the village clerk, and I'm asking her, hey, what is this form? What is this? I have no idea what this is. What is this doing in my office? I have no idea. Doesn't make me wrong to ask, right? Because a lot of the chief duties are pushing paper around, but at the same time, you don't know how to do it, you got to ask somebody, or you look it up online, or you find, you do something, you find something out. Because guess what? By doing that, you're gaining knowledge. You're now knowing, okay, well, the next time I see this, oh, okay, well, yeah, I saw that 3 months ago. This is how this works. But there you go, and we're done. And the other thing too, I think, Ben, when you were getting to it, is if I'm trying to explain something to somebody, so there was a perfect situation. We had a new lieutenant. He comes over to me and he's like, Mark, if I ask you to get me the can, what are you going to grab? I'm like, well, I'm going to get you the water can. Yeah, I'm going to get you the can. Well, that freaking kid comes over with the freaking giant ABC extinguisher. I'm like, well, okay. Well, he doesn't know what a freaking can is. I'm like, well, did you tell him? Did you explain to him? Outside of berating him for not knowing what a can is versus an extinguisher, because the kid's 21 years old and has never, done anything in his life, he's scared and nervous, and he's on probation. And he's trying not to screw up. So he's not sure what to do. And so instead of asking, because he's going to get berated, he just grabs the first thing he sees. Right. And then it's like, okay, well, how did you remedy the situation? Well, I chewed his ass. Okay, great. Now what? How's that? That kid now feels horrible. He thinks he's a failure, all these different things, and it's just like, well, there's a better way to have done that. There's a more, comes over with the, the extinguisher, and it's like, okay, well, that's not what I wanted. All right, go back and get the water can. Okay, go back and get the water can. That's fine. We got time. It's all right. People are not hanging out the windows. There's this not, yeah, there's a fire here. We want to get it. But at the same time, there's some time to deal with what we're dealing with. Just run back over it. That's 25 feet. Go back to the truck. Get that freaking water can. Come back here. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, great. There is a way to go about teaching and there's a way to go about berating. And, that also is a fine line too, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, we're at about an hour and 15 minutes. So I feel like this is a conversation. There was something, Mark, that you had said earlier about the younger generation, but that is a whole other conversation.
The whole other topic.
Yeah, holy cow. Teaching the younger generation, that again, a whole other conversation. We'll have to delve into that some other time. But let's go ahead and do like we normally do, just kind of go around the horn. Michael, we'll go down to you. Like I said, I know you got a lot going on. So do you have any final thoughts for us?
Well, Chief, thanks for being on tonight. And it's always a pleasure to talk about some different things. Where a lot of times we're talking strategies and tactics of firefighting. And it's good to have someone on that delves a little bit deeper into the mindset of actual the education level, the learning and the understanding, and getting this information and how we're going to make it transcend through the generations and the important little aspects of that. So it is nice to it's definitely a breath of fresh air. So thank you. And I think that one of the big things that I hope viewers take away tonight is understanding where their role is in all of this. If they are relatively new and they don't have a lot of tenure, what are some lessons that they can take away from the conversation that we had? And then, of course, the officers of houses, the officers of companies. Hopefully, they've understood that, hey, I need to be a little bit more intuitive and I need to analyze my guys a little bit more to get a good understanding of maybe where they need to go and how I need to lead them there as far as that education. And then, of course, as I said earlier, sitting here with chiefs on the screen at the management level, our expectations for our officers below us and allowing, that trickle down effect to the expectations that the officers need to have for their crews as far as that learning and education and dissemination of knowledge goes. So that's my thought on it, man. I thought it was a great show. And Chief Hill, I appreciate you being on here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you got some projects going on, so we appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Thanks, buddy. Trevor?
And absolutely, I want to kind of reiterate what Ben's saying. Mike, thanks for taking your time. I know you got a million things going on at once. And it's kind of cute that you pretend you don't have a white helmet too, but nevertheless, we still love you, brother. But Chief Hill, thank you for being on tonight. Just as kind of a summary statement, I find that a lot of times in the fire service, generationally, we're a people divided by a common language. And with that, we just need to figure out, sometimes we're saying the same thing just in different ways, and it could be a regional thing, it could be a generational thing, it could be departmental thing, whatever the case might be. And I'll give you a quick example. I come from the Mid-Atlantic region, and I remember just going on a high-rise call in my early tenure in my current job, and I gave what I thought was a decent size up, and then told the incoming engine, it's like, Engine 80, go ahead and take the plug in the connection on the southeast corner. And they got there and kind of froze. And I'm like, these guys know what they're doing. What the hell is happening here? And so walked up, did a face-to-face and say, hey, guys, were you clear on the directive? I should take the plug in the connection. And they're like, what's the plug in the connection? I'm like, okay, let me do Maryland to Florida. I want you to take the FDC and a hydrant. Oh, okay, no problem. Boom, went right to work. So even though it was very clear in my mind, it was just we were totally on different ends of the spectrum, and it was all about verbiage. Just because that was what I was used to. Didn't mean to translate it cleanly into another region or area. So they're used to me now. I'm used to them. When they talk about a CBS structure, I'm like, why is your structure on TV? That's a concrete block structure. I didn't know what CBS was. I thought it was a broadcasting system, but nevertheless. So with that being said, I think that we need to take that time to kind of come down off our pedestal, not only as officers, but also instructors, and understand how different generations learn things. I mean, I saw that from being a young instructor and a young officer trying to instruct upward, and got some good sage advice when I was messing up. And now being towards, the almost a fourth decade of service, coming up, is looking at some of the people who are coming up behind me, and they're very intelligent, they're very well educated, they're very savvy, they're very tech savvy. And how do I take some of this information, to Ben's point, and be able to translate that into a digestible format? And I think, Mark, Chief, you're doing that through your book, through 2 Dark 30s, giving these analogies, and also just some very sage advice of how can we be better instructors, and how can we be better purveyors of the information in the fire service, regardless of where we are in the spectrum, and get that information across, not only for the generation now, but for those who are coming after us. And Mark, I really appreciate not only you coming on the show, but also giving that information and looking to inspire and grow the next generations of our industry. So much appreciated and much respected. So thank you very much, Chief Hill.
Thank you.
All right, Chief. Do you have any final comments for us? We're definitely gonna plug your book. So,
well, no, whatever. The book is one thing. That was just whatever. But I mean, I wrote the book for a reason. But at the same time, my passion has always been in trying to relay information and try the best I can to try to help as many people as possible. Whether I was teaching literally, whether it was coaching, whether I was, being a firefighter, volunteer, professional now, when I was chief. I mean, you always want to try to help someone. I think we wouldn't be in the industry that we're in if we didn't want to try to help people the best way we could, right? So my biggest thing is, however I can do that in whatever capacity I can, that's what I'm going to do. And if it's my message of trying to teach, and if, I have a book. Yeah. Okay, great. I've sold hundreds. I'm not worried about that. My thing is, have I gotten emails and have I had people contact me, through LinkedIn or Facebook, whatever, saying, hey, I loved this part of the book. I learned a lot. I'm going to try to do that. Fantastic. If I can help one person, everything, all the blood, sweat, tears, and, sitting and, having my back issues, it was all worth it to me. So, my biggest thing has always been, how can I, try to get the message out that teaching is in everything. Instructing is in everything, drilling, whatever word you want to use, right? You're going to do it no matter what. And whether you're the officer, whether you're on probation, you're going to end up being a teacher. And how you do that and how you communicate and how you understand the process is the biggest thing and the biggest takeaway. And the thing is, you don't have to know everything. You're going to screw up. We all learn more from our failures than, and our mistakes than by doing anything else, but at the same time, go back to, stupid sports analogies. Babe Ruth was the home run hitter, but guess what? He also had the league record for strikeouts, right? You can't win the lottery unless you buy a ticket, Michael Jordan made tons of game-winning shots, right? But he also missed a lot of game-winning shots. So unless you try to go and do those things, unless you put yourself out there, unless I forget who said that, the thing about you may not have enough experience, or you may not have, enough knowledge in a certain aspect, or whatever your worry is. If you know that, and we all know what our shortcomings are, we all know our weaknesses. If hey, you know what? I'm not really good at public speaking. Then guess what? You have to force yourself to get out there and do those things. If I know I'm not real good at hazmat situations, or, I'm a hazmat technician, okay, great. Yeah, I've got through the course and I'm certified, but you know what? I am not hazmat, guru. I know a guy, Lieutenant Quinn, he's my guy. If I have a hazmat question, or one of our retired battalion chiefs, Al, he was, they were chemistry hazmat nerds. If I have a question about those things, guess what? I'm not going to waste my time trying to figure all these different things to get, all these different books out. Hey, how is this working? How does this thing, I'm going to ask. And there's nothing wrong with that. People need to understand that you can ask questions. You're not expected to know everything, So, the best thing you can do is just ask, and don't worry about what people think. You're going to get your contractors. There's going to be people that are negative. You're going to have that. That's just life. And that's okay. It'll be fine. All right. As long as you're trying to do the best job you can, that's all you can ask.
Terrific. Well, thank you again for coming on and joining us. It was a great show, a lot of really good information, and hopefully those folks that were watching and that will listen, because tomorrow it'll go out as a podcast. We hope you get something from this. Like I said, in the podcast and on the website, we're going to have the link for the book, so please go check that out. If you guys have any questions or you want to get up with Chief Hill, let us know. We'll pass that along. Other than that, 2 weeks from today, I think it's June 8th, we have Lieutenant Basil Abraham coming back from Orlando. Just recently completed the Georgia Smoke Diver program, as well as ran a new program, 24 hours, a 24-hour long program called One Bad Tour. So we're super excited to hear about that. But that'll be in 2 weeks. So keep watching our social media stuff. And thanks for joining us. Chief, thanks again, and we appreciate it. Everybody have a good night, and we'll talk to you soon.